G'day folks, Scott here. Today I'm reviewing Hellraiser Judgment. This movie came out this week. A small part of me really wanted this movie to be good. A small part of me was sort of excited to see it, even though I should know better. So here's my review. I'll start spoiler free and then I'll go into some spoilers later on, and I'll give you ample warning before I do so. Look, the Hellraiser franchise I love a lot. Part 1 and 2. I think they're great movies. They complement each other well. They're not perfect. Some of the performances are a bit average. Some of the screenplay is a little average, but the imagery, horror, performance by Doug Bradley, all the other Cenobites, like everything about those two movies really worked for me. And I guess because I was younger and they were pretty extreme horror movies when they came out, they, really showed me a whole new level of, sort of gore and levels of depravity and some other things that they really touched on. Not a lot of the other movies had done like that up until that point. Hellraiser 3, I like moments of. There's parts of it that are good, but mostly it's pretty average. The performances are awful. Like the nightclub guy was woeful, and the reporter chick's pretty bad, and as always Doug Bradley was fantastic and held it together, and he has some really good scenes in there. But the Cenobites themselves, like especially the new ones like CD Guy and Barbie, and that were pretty bad. And then they had Hellraiser 4, I think that was called Leviathan maybe, and that was an anthology of stories. The one about the guy who made the cube was kind of cool, but the rest of it was pretty shit. And there was at least 4 or 5 after that I think, and they're all so forgettably awful that I don't remember what they're called, and I don't care to revisit them. I think this is the 10th Hellraiser movie. So if you look at all that as a base level, this is better than most of them, but that's not saying much. It's nowhere near number 1 and 2, it's nowhere near number 3, but it fits somewhere in around all those other ones. But that's like saying, hey, this piece of shit here doesn't smell quite as bad as this piece of shit, but they're still both shit, dude. You shouldn't really smell either of them, Like, I really don't know how to go and do anything other than say, if you're a diehard Hellraiser fan, you're probably going to watch this anyway. Obviously, a lot of the Hellraiser community was really wound up about the fact that they, of course, didn't get Doug Bradley back, and they've got a new guy to play Pinhead again, as I think the last one was called Hellraiser Revelation, and they had a new guy in that as well. This dude was better than the last dude. He did okay. I had some problems with the design of him. I didn't think his costume was as well done as Doug Bradley's was. This isn't... I don't know what this is. It doesn't seem like it's... It sort of seems like it's a sequel, but it doesn't really. And Pinhead is different. Like, his chest is different. It has this really pretty bad prosthetic with exposed ribs and stuff on there, and I don't like the outfit as much as I did the previous one. But... yeah, I don't know. So really, that's all I've got, like, as far as spoiler-free is concerned. Like, if you like Hellraiser, if you've watched the other ones especially, you're probably going to watch this regardless of what I tell you. But if you're like, oh, I don't mind the odd horror movie and I thought the first Hellraiser was good, you should probably just leave it be. Alright, from this point on, I'm going to go into all spoilers. I'm not going to ruin the whole story. I'm not going to touch, certain elements that happen, like, from the halfway mark onwards. But I really want to talk about just sort of a key moment, that really, I guess, where it tried to differentiate itself from the other Hellraiser movies and try and do something new, and it didn't work for me at all. This movie opens with Pinhead and this other Cenobite called the Auditor, I believe his name was. He's got the Lenin glasses and all the cuts and shit all over his face, having a conversation where they're talking about the fact that the cube from all the other, puzzle cube, from all the other movies, isn't working properly anymore. It's not drawing enough people to them. They're not getting enough souls or whatever it is they're looking for. They think it's outdated. Almost sounds like they're going to go on social media and have a Twitter account or something. They're looking for something new to get the kids in and excited again. So I'm like, okay. And so what they do, and this part's going to be all spoilers because it's fucking crazy, and I really sort of just need to say it out loud just to even reinforce to myself how fucking stupid it is. But they have a house out in the middle of nowhere. And then people get, and this is why it's called Judgment, they get a letter delivered to their home going sort of like, hey, come to this address and we'll give you a reward for something or other, and, you should come and check the place out. Which it's really kind of, I don't remember the exact wording of it. It was kind of dumb, didn't make sense. So anyway, this child molester guy gets one of these letters, like delivered in his mail or under his doorstep or something, and he goes to this house in the middle of fucking nowhere. They open the door, the auditor guy's there. This guy kind of immediately blanks out and wakes up tied in a chair in a room with a desk, and the auditor guy sitting across from him. He's got like transfusion cables, tubes, like coming into his arm, like a drip. And, like I said, he's tied to it. And that guy's sitting at the table with the typewriter. And he's like, I'm going to ask you a series of questions, or, we're going to have an interview, I think he called it. And the way you answer this depends on what's going to happen to you later on. But, basically we know everything, so you should just not bullshit us and tell the truth. Not in so many words. So long story short, he starts asking this guy all these questions, and of course gets it out of him that, he's a child molester and he's done all this sick shit that he shouldn't have done. And as he's asking these questions, he's typing all these responses out on an old mechanical typewriter. And as he's typing, blood is getting drawn from this guy into the typewriter, and his ink is writing this stuff, which is semi-cool. I'm like, okay, that's interesting, like typing all this shit out. He's like, okay, pulls the thing out of the typewriter, he's got a few pages, like, okay, so what's going to happen now is another dude, and I can't remember this guy's name, he's going to come in and he's going to go over like this stuff, and after that, then you're going to go to the cleaners, and then, we'll see what happens after that. I'm like, okay. So the guy stays tied in the chair, and then this weird sort of fat guy comes in. He's just like a normal looking kind of dude. He's just a bit fat and loopy looking. He kind of reminded me of the killer from Human Centipede 2, but with hair. He walks into the room, he sits down at the table, he's looking at this guy. The guy wakes up, and the pages are like in front of him, like on a plate or something. And he pulls out this little vial, and he I can't remember if he said or implies that they're children's tears, and he's all like, yummy, And he tips his shit on the paper of, this guy's confession that got typed out in a typewriter with his own blood, and proceeds to eat it with a knife and fork. You're like, oh, okay. And he does that, and then he gets sick, and he starts wanting to throw up, and he's acting all weird, and he runs to the back of the room, and he vomits that stuff up into a funnel in the wall with a tube that goes through the wall to the other side. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Does this. And then he gets in the guy's face again and leaves. And the guy's like, okay. And then we cut to around the corner. You see the tube coming out the other side of the wall, behind where that was. And all the vomit has gone into like a long trough, like a pig trough on the other side. And there's 3 topless chicks in G-strings sitting there. And they've got sort of like their face peeled off a little bit, sort of reminiscent of Julia and Frank, I guess, from Hellraiser 1 and 2. Not really Cenobites, I don't know what they're doing there. And they proceed to eat the vomit from the trough, right? And then the original guy, the auditor dude, comes in and sort of looks at them, and they all look at him and give him this kind of nod. And he goes back in the room like they pass judgment on him. And he's like, okay, you're done. Like, you're off to the cleaner and the surgeon, I think his name is now. It's like, okay. The guy then passes out, wakes up again, he's tied to a table. 3 old kind of ugly type women come into the room, and I shit you not, they lick him to clean him, right? And you're like, okay. Even though from the first time that happened, you weren't 100% sure what they were doing, but they were licking him to clean him. Cleanse him perhaps of his sins, I don't know. And then this weird big thing with a baby face comes into the room, looks like kind of like a rip-off of Leatherface, with a baby mask kind of thing. And then it turns around and opens up, and this thing called the surgeon jumps out, which is basically a dude in a gimp suit with a gas mask and an apron on, and these 2 kind of blade-like knives. And he cuts the guy to ribbons, peels his skin off, really bad-looking skin, by the way, and gives the skin to the 3 topless chicks. He gives them to someone else, like these 2 other Cenobites, because that's right, when this guy's getting all cut up, that's right, the girls are there, that's right, he gives them the thing, and then there's 3 tubes that come out of the table this guy gets cut on, and those 3 tubes, kind of phallic kind of things, squirt blood all over this chick's tits. I'm not kidding, I couldn't make this up. And I'm like, what the fuck has any of this got to do with Hellraiser? I get that you have the term judgment in your title, and I get that this is some kind of twisted judgment on this guy who was a sinner and had to be judged for his sins. I get it. But the whole thing's felt like more of a dumb, perverted rip-off of Texas Chainsaw Massacre than it did like a Hellraiser movie. Intercut throughout this scene is the odd shot of Pinhead in a dark room sitting in like a concrete kind of chair thing, just looking at the wall. And I'm like, well, we've established in the previous movies that the Cenobites and Pinhead and the other Cenobites were with him. They didn't give a shit what you did, whether you were good or bad or anything. If you invited them to you by getting your hands on this cube and solving that puzzle, then it didn't matter if you were the Pope or a child molester, you were going to get the same treatment. They brought you pleasure and pain and an eternity of both, and it was all about them pleasuring themselves by tormenting you and keeping on that brink of both. And it was always a very bondage S&M kind of like, you know, you love it both ways kind of thing. This had nothing to do with any of that. Like, the guy just got cut to pieces and then we moved on. The rest of the movie is this cop story about these two cops who get a new chick given to them from the DA's office or something, who are trying to track down a serial killer who's been murdering people for ages, called the Preceptor or something, I think he was called. And it's a total rip-off of Seven, with this person having something to do with the 7 deadly sins with every killing and all this kind of shit, all done before. And they find a way to make this detective story kind of work into the story of what's going on in that house. And they do it very poorly. Somewhere towards the end of the movie, there's like an okay traditional Hellraiser kind of sequence in a room with chains and hooks, and Pinhead has some okay lines. And like I said, that guy did a pretty reasonable job of it. Like, he spoke the part and all, but the lines were all really rehashed, and all the stuff with him was really rehashed from previous ones. You know, there was just, that's it. That's all I got. Like, I don't know what else. It wasn't really that gory. I mean, they sort of made a big deal that it was going to be gory and stuff, and like in a level of looking, especially the unrated version of Hellraiser 1 and especially Hellraiser 2, it wasn't near as gory as those movies. I guess all the weird licking and blood on tits and all that kind of shit could be a little more disturbing perhaps than some of the elements in the other one. Obviously there was always a mixture of like kind of sex and violence and all that kind of stuff, but never more that sort of, you know, weird fetish kind of shit the way it was in this one. Like I said, the stories didn't really mesh together that well, although the auditor guy seemed like a Cenobite, and Chatterer makes a return, and there were 2 other new kind of looking Cenobites that were sort of specifically around Pinhead all the time. The weird surgeon guy and the fat eating pages with children's tears guy and the Patopolis girls, like none of them felt like anything that we've had in the Hellraiser universe before. And I found that a bit unnecessary. Like, if you're going to reboot this thing, you should reboot it hard. And if you're going to reboot Hellraiser, why not let the guy who's going to make Martyrs, who had his script all written and stuff years ago, where they're going to be dressed in white and it was going to be totally different and way more intense and all that, but the studios backed off because they didn't want to stray too far from the garden path, do something new. Or let Clive Barker make his own, like reboot it himself. But this was a half-assed, low-budget, direct-to-video thing. I'm not taking it away from the guy who played Pinhead. It's not his fault. Everything else about the movie was poorly written, shit script, shit acting from some of the other performances, story that didn't make sense, weird shit that didn't make sense in the Hellraiser universe and all. Like, he was okay. Like, I think, you know, if you're intrigued about this movie, he would be the reason you would watch it anyway. But that's really all I got. Like, I don't want to ruin like what happens later in it for any reason other than if you are going to sit through this thing, you might as well get something out of it that you didn't know was coming. But believe me, I don't mean to overhype that. It's not a great twist or anything. It's just there's some story elements that I haven't yet revealed. That's all I got. I'm going to go see Black Panther in a couple of days. I'll be back to review that later. Yeah, it's a pretty disappointing movie, but like I said, compared to most of the other ones, it's still probably better than them, and that's all I got. So thanks for watching, guys. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.